Hello and welcome to another edition of Talk Vietnam. Now in this week's episode we are not in a studio because why would we when we can enjoy the beautiful beaches, the absolutely stunning sunshine and most importantly the water sports here. Now this week is more than just the water sports, it is a means of changing environmental conservation and marine protection here in Vietnam. So with no further ado, let's meet Julia Shaw in Mũi Né. First of all, thank you very much for joining us here on Talk Vietnam. The name Manta is rather quite a catchy name. I've always tried to figure out what it is. Could you tell us a little bit about the origin of it and what it derives from?
Well, actually, Manta, the name, came from my older nephew when he was about 4 or 5. And I needed a name that was non-controversial but related to wildlife and water sports. And he stopped for 2 seconds while he was play fighting with his younger brother to give me an answer. And so I had to use it.
So it has something to do with the manta ray and some of the marine animals, right?
That's right. Water sports and wildlife are the main themes for a manta.
So manta sailing, despite the fact that it is a sail training, mainly a sail training project, it is also a marine conservation project as well. Can you explain a little bit more about this?
I was invited to work in Vietnam to set up a charity to help stop illegal trade in endangered wildlife. And after helping set up an animal hospital for Vietnam near Cu Chi, we decided that marine life was in more trouble. So the wildlife and sailing angle came together with manta.
Okay, and it started out near Con Dao Archipelago, right? Can you tell us a bit more about the beginning?
That's right. Con Dao Archipelago, arguably as one of the best protected marine areas for Vietnam with forest protection status. And we were looking for alternatives for fishermen to take them off endangered wildlife. So
what was the condition of the, of the fishing industry at the time around the area, and what were some of the greatest sort of dilemmas that you guys had to face at the time? Fishing issues were significant. Like for example in Mũi Né here, at night time you'd just see lights like a city that just went back for miles, and you had tourism growing, more mouths to feed, fish quite small, getting smaller. Some of the biggest risks to the ocean were things like pollution, overfishing and climate change. And Mũi Né actually was under more pressure than Con Dao because there was no protected area, nowhere for the fish to hide, to grow and multiply. So how did you feel about that at the time? You know, obviously those were the early days of manta sailing, and you were kind of fresh at the time in Vietnam with the project too. How did that sort of like drive you into the action? Well, on one side, Vietnam still had a lot to protect, unlike a lot of other countries in the world. But at the same time, I just felt that wildlife wasn't going to be high on their priority. So something like a motivation like a national sport or protection of national boundaries might have had more momentum. This was the proposed solution to the dilemma, to the problem of overfishing that you had at the time, right? Could you please elaborate a bit further on that? So we were looking for a solution, and the solution that Manta came up with was taking fishermen off the endangered habitats, off the overfishing, and into water sports using their existing ocean skills.
Meet Trần Quốc Phục, a veteran instructor at Manta Sail Training Center.
Tôi làm ngành thể thao hôm nay là được tính vào 10 năm, tôi chạy cũng trên 500 người về môn thể thao này.
Phung's beginnings, however, were quite different when he met Julia Shaw. Like many others in the coastal Bình Thuận province over a decade ago, Phung lived off of the sea.
Tôi sinh ra tại Mũi Né. Cuộc sống của tôi là về gia đình của chúng tôi là từ đánh bắt cá ngoài biển, từ ngư dân.
When Julia settled in Mũi Né, she approached the group of fishermen in coracles. She tried to break the ice by asking to try it out for herself. Julia would soon offer these same fishermen lessons in sailing and a new career opportunity, using nothing but body language along the way.
Cổ cứ da ni, da dấu tôi giờ làm việc cổ.
Years of training and friendship later, Phung is now among a group of former fishermen who work at Manta alongside Julia. Fishing continues to be an indispensable source of livelihood for locals in the Bình Thuận coastal area. Nevertheless, jobs in water sports and tourism in general present alternative career options for the local community.
Trước đây cuộc sống của tôi cũng đi nghề biển, thấy biển chả đồ nó cũng làm vất vả quá rồi, cũng đi không ở trên, đi lên đi xuống, rồi nhờ bạn bè rồi giới thiệu vô gặp cô Dua, rồi cô Dua mới cho vô đây làm, rồi cô Dua dạy đồ cách kỹ thuật, kỹ năng đồ bườm.
Julia updates her employees on the latest international sailing techniques. In late 2013, Manta also became the venue for the International Sailing Federation technical course for Level 1 coaches, funded by the International Olympic Committee. For some of the instructors, Manta has given them a boost to a lifelong career in sailing. Manta's first sailing manager now coaches the national team. Meanwhile, others have ventured beyond the sport. Rớt here, for example, has become the top windsurfer in the region. Phung, on the other hand, is among the top 5 surfers in the region. Water sports have given him a different life.
Thú vị nhất là khi mà mình học thành đẹp thể thao, tiếng Anh cũng hơi trôi chảy, thì lúc đó thì cảm thấy mình hạnh phúc đi, và cái ngành thể thao giúp đỡ mình rất nhiều, và nó thay đổi cuộc sống của mình và trong tương lai của mình để mạnh hơn và khỏe hơn. Vừa có thể thao thể dục và có một cái kỹ năng gọi là thoải mái và tinh thần ổn định, tiếp xúc được nhiều người nước ngoài và có nhiều cái kỹ năng khác nhau và luôn luôn học tập.
So at the beginning, obviously, it was rather interesting as well as challenging for you to approach some of the fishermen because, you know, these guys are used to fishing instead of water sports. So how did you manage to approach them, and what were some of the challenges that you faced?
I think it was definitely something new to them, and I think some of them found it quite weird. But I think some of the fishermen were aware that the marine stocks were falling, and they could see that water sports were growing, and so maybe were curious and also maybe looking for new work opportunities. Language was one of the biggest issues at the beginning, and so for example, when the guys started at Manta, their English was as bad as my Vietnamese, but their English actually improved significantly, whereas mine stayed where it was.
And what else sort of connected you guys?
I think there is a passion for the environment, a passion for the ocean, and I think that's an international language, and that's what connected us.
How has convincing these guys to shift from fishing into water sports as a livelihood sort of contributed to the social development here in the area, as well as the community? How has that changed their lives?
Well, it gives them something more to bargain with their friends, something more to add to the community, I think. So, for example, in low season, when there's more time to interact with the rest of the community, they can exchange skills. So water sports training can be expensive, but they've got a training that they can swap with their mates. So for example, they can teach their friends sailing for free, and their friends can teach them windsurfing or surfing or kiteboarding or something like that. A bit of a barter trade.
So you began this journey of training the fishermen into certified water sports trainers a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, what were some of the challenges, some of the biggest difficulties?
Right, there wasn't a reference point for sailing, so there were no standards, no international standards, and that was something that was a big concern for me, because I felt that we had to cover our backs. We had to make sure that we minimized the risks when Vietnam's capacity for water sports was probably much lower than, say, other countries where they'd had sailing for 200 years or so. So I decided to connect with world sailing.
What sort of skills would these guys expect to receive from these training courses provided by you guys?
So we followed the world sailing guidelines, and those guidelines help train beginners in how to sail safely alone, and also they give a framework all the way through to Olympic sports as well. Instead of selling their fish, they could sell their sailing skills to clients, tourists passing through, because with Vietnam's growing tourism trade and water sports trade.
You said that these guys originally had some of their own sort of sea skills as well, right? Mm-hmm. How did this contribute to them adopting water sports?
There are a few examples that come to mind immediately. One was the first job that I gave the fishermen was sanding and painting little wooden boats we had. And so I would go, sand, paint, and they would go, no, machine, gun. So I would think, okay, I would just wait. And they ended up borrowing a sanding machine from their friend, also an air compressor from another friend, and a paint gun. And they did the best paint job I have ever seen on a little dinghy. It's just incredible. So ever after that, I would just tell them what needed to be done and just wait for them to come up with the best solution. Back in 2010, we were having to train a national team for the Asian Beach Games in Oman. Yeah, and that was before we opened the sailing school. And so the idea was that Oman had quite light winds. So we decided to do our training for early morning when the winds were light. And one of the secrets for light wind sailing is to get the weight well forward. And so I would pass this on to them and expect them to just sit a little bit further forward. But no, they have the most incredible ocean skills and ingenuity. And within seconds, they were just standing at the mast, sailing the boat more like a windsurf than a sailboat. And I've never seen that in 50 years, but I couldn't fault it.
Each sailing course at Manta usually takes place in the morning, when the wind is light and most suitable for sailing. Today, James Harris and Kathy Brown have traveled from Ho Chi Minh City to take their first lesson in sailing. While their first venture out on the water wasn't exactly smooth sailing, the sail students had a memorable experience.
It was my first time in a sailing boat. Capsized a couple of times, but that's to be expected. But it was a great deal of fun, and we intend to do it again.
It's lovely for us to come here. Being on the sea is so much better than being on the beach. So really fun.
At Manta, each course is specifically tailored for each client, depending on their experience. As beginners, James and Kathy took the getting afloat lessons, while more experienced sailing enthusiasts could opt for progressive, race, or advanced sailing training. As former fishermen and also locals in the area, many of Manta instructors have a uniqueness to offer their clients and students.
Người dân đi biển người ta rất là giỏi về cái mặt là thời tiết và gió và sóng. Trong khi đó là cái thời tiết, gió và sóng là để kết hợp với thuyền buồm, là có nghĩa là cách an toàn cho bản thân của mình và cách chỉ định hướng gió chính xác cho mình. Rồi sau mình có một cái hoàn toàn cái kinh nghiệm về mặt đi biển, về mặt thuyền buồm để mình chỉ cho các em sau này.
Well, obviously, he's a very good instructor, very experienced, and it never felt for a moment when he was in control that we were going to capsize.
No.
As soon as I was in control, we capsized twice.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. And he's
great.
very patient. He didn't mind when we fell over.
Coming to Manta alongside sailing, one can also try other water sports, such as wakeboarding or stand-up paddle, among others.
Let's rewind now back to the beginning of you starting a water sports sort of facility here. What was the scene like at the beginning, and were there any sort of like opportunities that you saw?
When I first arrived in Vietnam in '93, I was in the plane and just amazed at the coastline of Vietnam. And I decided that when I landed, I would just go along the coast and look for sailing, to see who was sailing. And I went along the whole coast, nobody was sailing. But when I came back to work in Vietnam in 2003, there was kiteboarding out of the windsurf center, and that was awe-inspiring. And if there was a strong wind, we're very lucky in Vietnam because you've got unique sand dunes, and the sand dunes warm up and the hot air rises, brings in the cool air from the sea, which makes Mui Ne a unique setting for water sports. At the beginning, back in 2003, only about 6 kiteboarders through the high season. And if there were any low wind days, they would be really ingenious. They would get their kite going and they would jump into one of those little coracles. And I have never seen anyone paddle so fast. It was hysterical. I was just killing myself laughing, watching them on the beach. Nothing would stop these guys, I think inspired by the spirit of Vietnam.
Obviously, Mui Ne has also evolved into a major tourism hub in southern Vietnam too. Do you think that sailing in particular and water sports in general had anything to do with this?
I think yes. For example, the way the whole bay developed was quite incredible. So I understand about 20 years ago it was just a beach track, maybe one hotel. And now there are over 100 hotels which are fully booked in high season. And what we found was that kiteboarders, just a handful of kiteboarders, they would come back year after year for a few months at a time in high season, and it was just like a family. So your mates would keep coming back. So there's a really good atmosphere in the bay that's developed around water sports, around kiteboarding, with the locals, with so many different nationalities. It's multicultural, and everybody's part of this mishmash of a big family.
So over time, the tourism sector here grew simultaneously with the love for water sports here in the area. What kind of role does this have in the improvement of living standards of the local people here?
In the last 12 years, there's been a growth directly in water sports and indirectly. So with the kiteboarding centres, there was one 12 years ago. Now they're probably over 30. I've lost count. And also the services that go along with the water sports. So there are shops that sell water sports gear. There are the restaurants. People after water sports, they need to relax. There are great places for a massage. Then also there are tours that take people out to the dunes. And so going from fisheries where the marine stocks are falling, to growing sports of tourism and water sports and all that comes with it, directly or indirectly, I think it's had a significant impact on improving quality of life.
So Vietnam joined the International Sailing Federation in 2012, correct? What did this mean for Manta and the other water sportsmen in the region in particular?
When we were setting up the sport, Vietnam Olympic Committee based on our initial marine conservation projects, asked for help to develop sail sports for Vietnam. I told them it was too big for me, so we had to go along with World Sailing Federation, which they did, and they did fast track. And the idea there was that Vietnam sports universities, the 3 of them, they can advise government, and that's a fast track for setting up a sailing federation instead of going through all of the provinces and the Ministry of Interior in each province. So by going through the universities, those university students can learn the skills and then take them back to their provinces and help with dispersing the sail skills across the length of Vietnam.
Aside from being a training center, Manta sees itself as an umbrella advisory organization committed to promoting, developing, and standardizing sail sports for Vietnam. Manta works with Vietnam's Olympic Committee in collaboration with the Ministry of Transport University and the National Sports Training Center in order to affiliate with regional and international sail sports federations. In 2012, Julia Shaw received the International Olympic Committee scholarship to draw the national sailing plan for Vietnam. The funding also allowed for extensive training at Manta for coaches from 5 provinces in Vietnam.
To get a better understanding, a more vivid understanding of how it works in each of these sailing sessions, I've asked Julia to actually put me into one of those and experience it all for myself and for you to watch as well. So what are you waiting for? Let's dive in!
Cool. Yeah, we put this down to stop the boat going sideways, okay? To balance the boat, one is with our body weight on the side, using the tow straps to keep us in the boat. The other is keeping the wind in the sail, which is a bit like the accelerator, so when we get going, we just pull the accelerator on, catch a bit of wind,
So what do you think are some of the most appealing factors about water sports in general and sailing in particular?
I think what's wonderful about sailing is that you never stop learning. It doesn't matter how good or bad you are at sailing, you can enjoy it just as much as the next person. And you never stop learning. You've got the actual technical skills of the boat and the training, the competition. You've also got the social skills, working independently or as a team. And sailing and water sports is another form of transport. You've got a better chance of survival if you know how to propel yourself around and live on the sea. And also, I think it's a way to promote Vietnam's incredible coastline as well.
Now, I believe that you also started sailing as a young lady back in the past too, at a very early stage in your life. How did you all begin? Can you describe and share with us a little story?
My mother was passionate about sail sports, and she taught me when I was 4. And we lived in, I was born in Sarawak, and we used to go to see our grandmother in the UK, and our grandmother's house was too small, so we used to live on a boat, and so it was practical for my mother to teach me how to sail, age 4. And then I found that I wanted to teach my friends when I was about 5, because otherwise I didn't have anyone to sail with. So it was a very natural development.
How did this sort of build up your connection, and how did this sort of you know, strengthen the bond between you and the ocean?
When you were sitting on a boat, you could see the wildlife out on the salt marshes, the curlews with their pointy beaks. Rather like here, we see the grey egrets and other wildlife, but also the quality, the water quality. So I think one example is surfers against sewage. If you love surfing, you appreciate a clean ocean to surf.
Over the years, a big part of Manta's activities has not only been, you know, educating the tourists about sailing, but also to bring it to school, to bring it to the students. Can you share a little bit more about this, and why so?
That's so true. We do train large groups of school children, up to 50 in a morning, and I hope that it benefits them from broadening their curriculum. What I really love is when you see that light go on in a child's face, that light of windsurf passion, and nothing beats it. It's just instantaneous. And then when you see a whole crowd of 50 kids leaving with bigger smiles than when they arrived, it's just, you wouldn't do anything else in the world. It touches the heart.
School kids, coming to Manta not only exposes them to training to sail safely alone and in teams, the youths are also introduced to a wide range of water sports survival skills. Some of the recent major groups of students who have trained at Manta include 66 kids from Saigon South International School, or 71 kids from International School of Ho Chi Minh City.
So obviously, Manta has been the primary reason that has occupied you and you know, kept you here in Vietnam. Are there anything else that have actually been able to do so, to draw you to Vietnam, to you know, glue you to Mui Ne?
I think it's the friendships that have developed despite the odds, or maybe because of the odds. And I just love the way that my staff work like a family. I feel them as part of a family, and I love Vietnam for the friends I have here. And if I leave Vietnam for whatever reason, I just always want to come back. I miss Vietnam, whether it's the geography, whether it's the culture, whether it's my mates. Many benefits of Vietnam. The relaxed way of life, and you never stop learning.
And having been so close to the ocean and the environment, obviously you've always cared for environmental conservation too. But what sort of issues first drew you to marine conservation, and what would you like to address?
There are many issues to address with marine conservation worldwide. So I think the oceans are at risk from pollution, overfishing, climate change. And there's a uniqueness in Vietnam on the way to address it. So for example, I think we can use water sports to help protect marine life, not only taking the fishermen off endangered habitats and giving them another way of life, but also to organize the safety of sailing. It's cool to have different areas for sail sports. So instead of having all sail sports or all water sports in one area, like fishing boats, jet skis, kiteboarding, windsurfing, sailing, swimming, wakeboarding, just in one area with the swimmers. It's actually quite cool to have different areas to help, you know, help the safety side. And also closing areas to water sports can protect wildlife, the marine life, seasonally. And if it comes from fishermen, that's also cool, because fishermen know where the fish are and when they need to be protected. And they can see the benefits. In Hong Kong, I could see the benefits of a marine protected area. Literally within a few weeks or months, you could see the stocks grow and the diversity come back.
Julia first visited Vietnam in 1993 and came back to Ho Chi Minh City in 2003 to set up Wildlife at Risk, an organization combating illegal wildlife trade in the country. She played a vital role in setting up the Cu Chi Wildlife Rescue Center in September 2006. She then spent 2 years in Con Dao Archipelago to train local forest rangers on identifying at-risk animals. It was also a Wildlife at Risk project that took her to Mũi Né in 2009. Here she saw the potential to develop sailing alongside marine conservation work. She has made a home in the coastal town ever since.
So were there any particular events or points in your life where you just felt like, you know, this is the time, I have to take action, I have to do something about the environment?
My first memories of growing up in Sarawak when I was less than 3 were the powerful rainstorms and the smell of the forest and just something fundamental about the environment. And then my strongest subject at school was botany. And the first time I was really called to action was when there were changes in the forests in Sarawak, and I was still in contact with some of the ministers there. So I felt a bit of responsibility to help redress that balance. And I went to work with the Forest Department in 1990. When I was asked to work in Vietnam to help set up a charity to help stop illegal trade in endangered wildlife, I really had to draw on what could be done because I knew nothing about Vietnam really and the Vietnam wildlife. So I went around looking to find out what people were doing, what had worked, what needed to be done, and just what we could do to help.
Could you share a memorable story in a journey trying to protect the wildlife here in Vietnam?
Okay, there was something quite unexpected. I just came back from Sarawak and the East Sea had just dropped a load of rubbish on the beach just in front of Manta. And the Russian girls next door took photos, which sort of went not quite viral, but viral enough. And on Facebook, these pictures were shared with over 500 people. And I had a responsibility to reply to the comments coming in because it was on Manta's doorstep, and that's where we could actually do something. Within a week, government came together with us and offered more than 400 people with trucks and diggers, and we had the local community all working to clean up the beach. It was monumental and totally unexpected.
Not only had a massive pile of trash wash up from the sea onto Manta's doorstep, a team comprising of Manta's staff, provincial authorities, expats, tourists, and locals had all come together in order to clean it up. Beach cleanups have now become a part of Manta's occasional weekend activity, changing the mindset of even some of their own employees.
Một người dân á, như tôi, lúc đó tôi cũng thải rác thải ngoài biển cũng như mọi người khác. Trong khi mà tôi học cách theo mấy người nước ngoài, tôi giữ sạch cái môi trường, sạch đẹp hơn và cái đường phố sạch hơn và những cái bãi biển càng sạch tốt và có nhiều khách du lịch để tới tham quan và có một bãi biển để chơi thể thao tốt để có nguồn thu nhập cho cái du lịch Bình Thuận nói chung.
Beyond using water sports and tourism as an attraction to direct fishermen from overfishing, Manta hopes to continue taking concrete actions to promote a clean and environmentally healthy coastline for the future development of not only the province, but also of Vietnam.
Some of the fishermen themselves actually took action and started writing a paper on marine conservation. Can you share a little bit with the audience of Talk Vietnam about this?
I never stop being surprised at the capacity of the fishermen. And so, for example, if they were visiting scientists and scientists asking for help, without doubt, the fishermen came to help. So our first sailing manager was able to write a joint paper with the shark fisheries how those shark fisheries have changed over the years, and they went to interview the shark fishing families and actually found out some positive changes, that now instead of sharks being caught and just the fins being used, now the whole shark is used without being thrown back to the sea. And so that particular paper on shark fisheries became a footnote in a regional paper on shark fisheries.
Your experience in Vietnam changed from 12 years ago to now. How has it evolved? How has it changed? How comfortable do you feel here now?
I feel much more grounded in Vietnam, and also with the environment. And when I arrived, I might have come with Western approach to conservation, for example. And I've definitely modified that to something that's more practical or relevant to Vietnam. What I love about Vietnam is the way things flow and the way the water sports flows, even the traffic. People just find a way. And also a culture that's still closely connected to the environment.
For Manta, besides overfishing, are there any other areas of concern that you guys would like to target, that you guys would like to change in the future?
Well, directly with Manta, we'd like to improve our sustainability, our buoyancy. And so now that we've brought in large groups of school kids, we're rolling out a program for corporations where they can gather their community service and environmental credits and team building with sail sports and climate change survival skills. So that could benefit Manta. What I'd really like to see with the environment are more marine protected areas. It would be so cool if marine protected area and the sailing safety areas could tally with advice from the fishermen on where significant species, endangered species are spawning, or where the nursery areas are that could be protected at certain months of the year, just so that Vietnam's marine stocks can grow and multiply. And following General Giap's call for Vietnam to protect its natural resources, I think that would be such a cool development.
It was such a pleasure talking to you. I feel absolutely inspired about my, about the ocean and everything now.
Many thanks for your time.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Now that has wrapped up this edition of Talk Vietnam. We hope that through this you understand a lot more about the importance of environmental conservation anywhere around the world, not just in Vietnam, and also the important role that water sports play in environmental protection and conservation too. Thank you very much for joining us. Goodbye for now, and until next time. It's an exciting day today as I get to experience how to deal with the capsize boat, which is right there. Not again!